During my vasectomy consultation, the doctor pulled me aside. "I need to tell you something about your blood work." "What is it?" I asked, a slight tension already rising in my chest. He looked uncomfortable, shuffling the papers in front of him. "You're sterile. You've been that way your entire life." The words hit me like a physical blow. Sterile, I couldn't comprehend it at first. "But I have 3 kids," I blurted, my mind racing. 3 children I had raised, loved, and assumed were mine. How could this be possible? The doctor nodded slowly, his expression apologetic. "I ran the test twice. Even sent it to another lab. I'm certain of the results." I stood up without thinking, my legs shaky. The walls seemed to close in, the air suddenly thick and heavy. I needed space, I needed to breathe. But all I could do was stare at him, the room feeling smaller with each passing second. What are you saying?" "I'm saying you've been sterile your whole life, James. It's congenital." I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, nothing made sense. It was a cruel joke. How could it be? How could I have 3 children and not be their father? The weight of it was unbearable. Then, as if on cue, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen. Dylan's name flashed across it. "Dad, Mom, she's making us." Dylan's voice cut off abruptly and the line went dead. My heart skipped a beat, panic replacing the shock in my chest. "Dylan." I shouted into the phone, but it was already too late. I called back, but the line went straight to voicemail. Marina's number, voicemail again. My mind scrambled. What was happening? Why was Dylan calling in such distress? Was this somehow connected to what the doctor had just told me? I tried texting Dylan, but it wouldn't send. The small red exclamation point glared at me, taunting me. Something was terribly wrong. Without thinking, I jumped into my car and drove. The world around me blurred as I sped through the streets. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles ached. I couldn't focus. The shock of the diagnosis was suffocating, but Dylan's voice, his words, kept echoing in my mind. The drive home felt like it took a fraction of the usual time. I barely noticed running a red light or cutting off a delivery truck. I was completely consumed by the fear that something had gone terribly wrong at home. I turned into the driveway, the house ahead of me looking different somehow. Dylan's bike lay in the driveway, still spinning slowly. It should have been quiet. Why wasn't it quiet? Kayla's shoes were scattered by the front door, which was wide open. My stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. I ran up the porch steps and inside. "Dylan, Kayla." I called, my voice barely above a whisper. The house was unnervingly still. The living room was a mess, cushions on the floor, picture frames face down. There was no sound, no laughter, no normal chaos that came with having kids. I moved quickly, heart pounding in my chest. I reached the stairs and ran up, 2 at a time, my mind racing. Dylan's door was locked. "Dylan, open up." I shouted, banging on the door. "Dad, don't let her." Dylan's voice was muffled, but it was clear he was in trouble. I heard a crash from inside. And then, Kayla screamed. I threw my shoulder into the door. It splintered but held. A second and the lock gave way. The door flew open. What I saw made no sense. Dylan stood in front of the closet, his arms outstretched, his lip bleeding and shirt torn. Kayla sat on the bed, holding Mariel close, both of them crying. And in the center of the room, there stood Marina, holding Dylan's baseball bat with a white, knuckled grip. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild with something I hadn't seen in 20 years of marriage. "Marina, what the hell is going on?" "They know," she said, her voice eerily calm. "They know everything." "Know what?" I asked, my heart racing. She didn't answer directly. "Put down the bat." "Don't," she pointed it at me, her voice cold, flat. "Don't act innocent. I saw your face when you came home. The doctor told you, didn't he?" I stepped back, trying to process her words. "How do you know?" "I've known for 16 years. She replied, her laughter jarring, as if she were mocking me. "Since Dylan was born, and I saw the blood type on his hospital bracelet. AB positive. You're O positive." It hit me like a freight train. Basic biology, impossible odds. Dylan is Roy's, Kayla's Logan's, Mariel is Sterling's. My entire world collapsed in that moment. All the years spent with my children, all the memories, the birthdays, the school plays, every scraped knee and bedtime story, suddenly felt like a lie. Marina laughed again, the sound cutting through me like glass. "Happy now?" Dylan's eyes widened. "Mom, what are you saying?" I didn't know what to say. Couldn't find the words to express the hurt, the betrayal, the crushing weight of what was happening. And then, everything shifted. My whole life, all of it a lie. I stood there, frozen, as Marina's words hung in the air. Dylan is Roy's. Kayla is Logan's. Mariel is Sterling's. Each name was like a punch to the gut. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move. Everything I thought I knew about my life, my family, crumbled into nothing. I looked at Dylan, who stood in front of the closet, arms outstretched, as though trying to shield something or someone from the truth. His lip was bleeding, his shirt torn, but his eyes were wide, full of confusion and fear. "Mom, what are you saying?" Dylan repeated, his voice shaking. Kayla was sitting on the bed, clutching Mariel, her face streaked with tears. Mariel, too young to understand the gravity of the situation, just clung to her, the terror in his eyes matching mine. I felt my knees buckle slightly, but I stayed upright, staring at Marina, trying to make sense of what she'd just thrown at me. For a long moment, no one spoke. The only sound was the soft, uneven breathing of the kids. The room felt suffocating, like the walls were closing in on me. Finally, I managed to whisper, "Why? Why didn't you tell me?" She looked at me, that same coldness in her eyes. "It didn't matter. You were a good father to them. You gave them everything." Everything. I felt the anger rising inside me. I gave them everything because I thought they were mine. My children. My family. "They are your family," she said, her voice flat. "But they're not yours biologically. And now, you know." The air in the room felt thick, like it was closing in around me. My heart pounded in my chest. It wasn't just the betrayal that hurt, it was the years of memories, of believing I was a father, knowing I wasn't. Everything, all those moments I cherished, felt like lies. I turned to Dylan, trying to process the truth. "Dylan, my voice faltered, and I had to stop myself. How do you explain this? How do you make sense of something like this to a 15-year-old who just learned his entire world was a lie?" Dylan stepped back slightly, his expression unreadable. He was trying to hold it together, but I could see the cracks in his face. I reached for him, but he flinched, like he wasn't sure what to do with my touch anymore. "Are you still my dad?" he asked quietly, his voice barely a whisper. That hit me like a physical blow. I froze. This wasn't just about Marina. This was about them, the kids I had raised, loved, protected, the ones I had given my everything for. And now they were asking me if I was still their father. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. There was no easy answer. Nothing I could say would fix this. "I'm not leaving you." I finally managed, my voice hoards. "I don't care about biology. I don't care about any of that. I'm not going anywhere." The words felt hollow, but they were all I had. Marina's eyes narrowed. "You don't get it, do you? This changes everything. You can't just pretend like none of it matters. I've been carrying this burden for years, and now I've been carrying it too." I snapped, cutting her off. "You think I've been blind to everything? To your lies, to the way you manipulated me? You think I didn't feel something was off?" She opened her mouth to argue, but I wasn't going to let her. I couldn't. I looked back at the kids, still huddled together on the bed, and my heart broke. I was angry, but it wasn't just for me anymore. It was for them. "You need to leave," I said, my voice steady now. "You need to take your things and leave. This is my house too, and I won't let you destroy them any more than you already have." Marina stared at me, her face a mix of disbelief and rage. "You don't know what you're doing," she said, her voice trembling with fury. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but I'm not letting you use them as pawns in your game anymore." There was a moment of silence, and then Marina's expression hardened. "Fine," she spat, "but you'll regret it." She turned, storming out of the room, her footsteps echoing down the hallway. I stood there for a long moment, the weight of what had just happened settling on me like a blanket of lead. The world I thought I knew was gone, and I had no idea how to piece it back together. I looked back at the kids. Dylan, Kayla, and Mariel were still sitting there, still processing everything. Dylan met my eyes, his expression softer now, a flicker of the boy I had raised still there. "Dead," he said quietly. "What happens now?" I didn't have an answer, not yet, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let this tear us apart. I wasn't going to let Marina's lies destroy everything I had fought for. I crossed the room and sat down beside him, pulling them all into my arms. "We'll figure it out," I whispered, "together." But even as I said it, I knew we were far from okay. This was just the beginning. The days that followed Marina's departure felt like a blur. The house was eerily quiet, and I found myself moving through it on autopilot, cooking meals, making sure the kids went to school, handling the small routines that had once felt so normal. But nothing was normal now. Every corner of the house seemed to whisper of the life we had lost, the life I had believed was mine. I tried not to let it show, but the weight of everything pressed down on me. How could I be the father of children who weren't even mine? How could I keep giving them all the love I had when the truth about their paternity hung over us like a dark cloud? Dylan was the hardest to read. He was trying so hard to act like everything was fine, but I could see it in his eyes, the confusion, the betrayal, the anger. He kept his distance, and it broke my heart. He was still my son, no matter what biology said, but the walls he was putting up felt insurmountable. Kayla seemed to retreat into herself, her usual chatter replaced by long silences. Every time I looked at her, I saw her trying to make sense of the chaos we were living in. She would ask questions, but they were always the same. Questions about Marina, questions about the truth, and questions that I had no answers for. Mariel, though he was too young to fully grasp what was happening, but he knew something was wrong. He clung to me like I was his anchor in the storm, holding on tightly when I picked him up or sat beside him. He didn't ask questions, he just wanted to be close. It was all I could do to keep it together for them. On the third day after Marina left, I sat at the kitchen table, a legal pad in front of me, my laptop open to a search engine. The kids had left for school, and the house was finally quiet again. I should have been relieved, but I wasn't. I was just tired of the lies, tired of the pain, of living in a house that no longer felt like home. I wasn't going to fall apart. I couldn't. Not with the kids relying on me, but I had to do something. I couldn't let Marina get away with this. I needed answers, and I needed a plan. I started with Roy Hardy. I didn't know where to begin, but I knew I had to find him. The man who had been my best friend, my confidant for years. The man who'd slept with my wife and had fathered my son. The betrayal stung like nothing I had ever felt before. But I needed to know where he was now. I found him in minutes. His LinkedIn profile popped up first. Roy Hardy, the smiling young man I remembered from college, now working at a venture capital firm in Portland. His career had taken off, just like he always said it would. But what about his family, his wife and kids? Did they know about Dylan? Did he even care? I sat there for a long time staring at his profile photo, remembering the times we spent together. I used to admire him. I wanted to be like him, the confident, charming guy who could talk his way into anything. But now, he was just a man who had ruined my life. I picked up the phone. I was going to call him. I had to. But before I could dial, the phone rang. I stared at the screen. An unknown number. I hesitated, but then picked up. "Hello, Mr. Caldwell." A woman's voice said on the other end. "This is Amber Becker from Thornton Family Law. Your wife retained our services yesterday. We're calling to inform you that Mrs. Caldwell is filing for divorce and full custody of the 3 minor children." I felt a chill run through me. The fight had officially begun. I repeated, my mind already racing. "Yes, sir. Mrs. Caldwell has made serious allegations regarding your fitness as a parent. She's also requesting the marital home, full child support and alimony." I gripped the phone harder, my knuckles white. "What allegations?" "I'm not at liberty to discuss the details, but I would strongly suggest you obtain legal representation immediately." The line went silent for a moment. "Mr. Caldwell," the woman continued, "I'll be frank with you. I've been doing this for 20 years. Whatever's happening in your marriage, those kids need stability. I hope you'll keep their best interests in mind." Her words hung in the air, but they didn't make me feel better. If anything, they made me feel worse. Marina was playing her hand, and I had to be ready. I couldn't believe what was happening. Full custody. Was she really going to use the kids against me like this? She knew what she was doing. She knew that if she could paint me as unfit, she would win. But I wasn't going to let her. I hung up the phone and immediately called the first lawyer I could think of. Bruce Walker, a corporate attorney who had helped me with some contracts for my firm over the years. "Bruce, it's James," I said as soon as he picked up. "I need help." We talked for a while, and by the end of the conversation, I knew what I had to do. I wasn't going to lose my kids. I wasn't going to let Marina turn them against me. I needed someone who understood family law, someone who could help me fight. Bruce didn't hesitate. James, you need Nicholas Huerta. He's the best family lawyer in town. He's expensive, but if what you're telling me is true, you're going to need him. I thanked him and immediately called Huerta's office. The receptionist told me they could schedule a consultation for the following week, but I wasn't going to wait. I'll pay double for an emergency appointment today. I said, I need to see him now. The receptionist hesitated but finally agreed. I hung up the phone and stared at the legal pad in front of me. The kids had no idea what was coming. They were still trying to process the fact that Marina was gone. I wasn't going to let her take them from me. I would fight this. I would fight for them. The following day, I sat in Nicholas Huerta's office, the cold, sterile walls of the building reflecting the emptiness inside me. The office had the sharp, clinical feel of a lawyer's domain, gleaming glass surfaces, sleek furniture, and a sense of controlled professionalism. Yet, all I could focus on was the storm brewing in my chest. I had done everything right. I had built my life on solid ground: family, work, a house. Now, it was all slipping away. I could feel the ground beneath me cracking, and I was desperate to hold on to whatever I had left. Mr. Caldwell, it's a pleasure to meet you, Nicholas said as he entered the room. He was younger than I expected, early 30s maybe, with sharp eyes that didn't miss a thing. His suit was impeccable, and his confident stride commanded attention. I nodded, forcing myself to sit up straighter. You too. Thank you for seeing me on short notice. He sat down across from me and opened a folder, taking out a legal pad and pen. He didn't waste time. Let's get down to it. What's going on? I took a deep breath, running a hand through my hair. The words felt heavier now, the reality of what was happening too much to process all at once. I didn't know where to begin, but I had to start somewhere. My wife left me. I began, my voice tight. She's filed for divorce and full custody of the kids. Nicholas looked at me, his expression unreadable. He didn't react immediately, just took notes, then glanced back at me. And the children? They're mine, I said firmly, my chest tightening as I spoke. I've raised them for 13 and 8 years. I've been their father. But they're not biologically yours. I froze. His bluntness stunned more than I was ready for. No, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. No, they're not. And she kept that from me. Nicholas leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing slightly. So, let me get this straight. You've been raising 3 children who aren't biologically yours, and now your wife is using this information against you in court. Yes, I answered, the weight of his words hitting harder than I expected. She's requesting full custody. She's going for the house, child support, alimony, everything. He nodded, absorbing the details. And what do you want? I want my kids, I said, my voice raw. I want to keep them. I want them to stay with me. I've been their father since the day they were born. I'm not letting her take them. Nicholas stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. We'll fight for them. But we need a plan. This is going to be a battle, and she's going to use everything she can against you. I knew that already. What do I need to do? First, we need to get all your ducks in a row. I'll need evidence that you've been their father in every sense. Financial records, school records, photos, everything. We'll need witnesses who can speak to your relationship with them. And most importantly, we'll need to prove that she's been hiding the truth from you for years. The paternity fraud will be key in showing her character. I nodded. It wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't backing down. Second, Nicholas continued, I'll need you to think about the biological fathers. Roy, Logan, and Sterling. I stiffened at the mention of their names. Roy Hardy, my best friend. Logan Nichols, the ex-boyfriend who showed up at our wedding looking like a ghost. Sterling Shores, the neighbor who disappeared years ago. They were all part of this mess, but I didn't know if they had the guts to step forward. What about them? I asked. We need to track them down, see what their involvement has been. If we can show they knew about the kids and did nothing, it strengthens your case. I clenched my fists, my mind racing. I had spent 20 years with Marina, building a life together. Now, I was facing the fact that everything was a lie. The men who fathered my children were out there somewhere, living their lives while I had raised their kids. I'll find them, I said, my voice cold. I'll do whatever it takes. Nicholas looked at me, his expression calculating. Good. But remember, this is about more than just you. It's about the kids. We need to make sure they stay with you, James. That's the most important thing. I nodded again. The truth hit harder each time I said it out loud. It wasn't just about Marina anymore. It was about the kids. The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and legal jargon. Nicholas had me sign documents, asking for all the details about the divorce and custody battle. I answered his questions mechanically, the reality of the situation sinking in with each form I signed. Finally, as we wrapped up, Nicholas looked at me one last time. I'll start working on this immediately. It's going to take time, but we'll build a case. I want you to focus on the kids. I'll handle the rest. I stood up, shaking his hand. Thank you. As I left his office, the weight of the world still rested on my shoulders. I had no idea what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I wasn't going to let Marina take them from me. I'd fight for them. I'd fight until the end. I wasn't losing my kids. Not now. Not ever. The legal battle was more grueling than I ever imagined. Every day felt like a fight I couldn't win, yet somehow, I had to keep going. The weight of the situation sat on my shoulders like a constant pressure, but I didn't let up. I couldn't. Not with the kids depending on me. Marina's lawyer, Amber Becker, was ruthless. Every move they made was designed to rattle me, to push me into a corner. Full custody was still on the table, and each legal motion, each letter, each call made it feel like I was losing ground. I spent my days running through documents, meeting with Nicholas, piecing together the case that would protect my kids. It was exhausting, and the nights were the hardest. I'd lie in bed, staring at the ceiling, thinking about how my life had unraveled in a matter of days. I thought about the past, about the years I spent believing in the family I had built, and wondered if it was all a lie. But then, I'd hear the kids in the other room. Their laughter, the sound of their footsteps, the quiet moments we shared. They were my reason to fight. One afternoon, I met with Nicholas to go over the latest developments. The room was filled with legal papers, notes, and court motions. It felt like everything was piling up on me, but I knew I had no choice but to face it head on. James, we're making progress, but it's going to take more than just proving the paternity fraud. Nicholas said, his voice steady but filled with concern. We need to show that Marina is unfit, that she's not stable enough to have full custody of the kids. How do we do that? I asked, leaning forward. My mind was already racing with possibilities. We'll gather everything we can about her behavior. We need evidence of her manipulation, her emotional instability, the way she's used the kids as pawns. The words felt like a punch, but they were true. Marina had always been good at hiding her emotions, her true intentions buried beneath a veil of charm and false promises. But now, it was all coming to light. I've been through the photos, the kids' school records, and the medical reports. Nicholas continued. But we need more. We need testimony from those who've seen her for what she really is. I clenched my jaw. I didn't want to drag others into this, but I knew I had no choice. Who can help? Jessica Taylor, he said. She's been your friend for years. She knows Marina. She can testify to how Marina's behavior has affected you, the kids. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Jessica, she had been my closest confidant, the one person who had been there through it all. Of course she would help. I picked up the phone and dialed her number. The ring was long, but she answered on the third. James, she said, her voice soft but full of concern. What's going on? I need your help, I said, my voice tight. It's about the custody battle. There was a pause. I could hear her take a breath, and I knew she was processing everything. I'll help you, she said firmly. You know I will. Tell me what you need. Everything. I need you to testify about Marina, about what you've seen. I need to prove she's not fit for the kids. Jamie's. She began, her voice faltering. This is going to be hard. I know how much you care about her, but you need to think about the kids. You need to do this. I know, I whispered. I'll do whatever it takes. After the call, I sat in silence for a long time. The idea of involving Jessica, of asking her to speak out against Marina, wasn't easy. But I had to think about the kids. I had to protect them. A few days later, Jessica and I sat down in the conference room at Nicholas' office. She was calm, collected, and wore an air of quiet strength. She looked at me, her eyes soft but steady. I'm here for you, James, she said, her voice unwavering. I know, I said, my throat tight. I need you to help me end this. For them. We spent the next few hours going over the details. Jessica recounted moments she had witnessed. Times when Marina's temper had flared, when she had used emotional manipulation to control me, when she'd made the kids feel caught in the middle. The more she spoke, the clearer it became Marina's behavior wasn't just a series of unfortunate events. It was a pattern that had existed for years. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness as Jessica spoke. The woman I had loved for so long had become someone I barely recognized, and yet I knew I had to do this. For the kids. For their future. When we finished, Nicholas nodded. This will help. It's not going to be easy, but it's a good start. I stood up, my mind spinning. What happens next? We'll file the motions for custody, based on the testimony and the evidence we have. We'll also be preparing for the paternity hearing. The judge will want to hear all of it, the lies, the manipulation, the fraud. But remember, James, this is just the beginning. Marina's going to fight back. I nodded. I'm ready. It didn't matter how hard this got. I wasn't going to stop. Not now. Not after everything I had learned. The fight for my kids was just beginning, and I was going to win. The next few weeks blurred together as we prepared for the hearing. The kids continued to adjust to their new life, but I saw the cracks forming in their expressions. They were scared, confused. I couldn't let them see me falter. I had to be strong for them. And as the day of the hearing drew near, I felt the weight of everything resting on my shoulders. But no matter what happened in that courtroom, one thing was clear: I would fight to the end for them. The day of the hearing arrived faster than I expected. The weight of everything, of all the lies, the pain, the betrayal hung on my shoulders, and I could feel it in my bones. Every step felt heavy, every breath more labored than the last. I woke up early that morning, the stillness of the house more suffocating than comforting. Dylan was still asleep, his bedroom door slightly ajar, the dim morning light casting shadows across the hall. Kayla had already left for school, and Mariel, as usual, was the last one to get up. I didn't want to wake them, didn't want them to see me like this, struggling, teetering on the edge of losing everything I had worked for. But they were going to have to see it, whether I was ready or not. I dressed slowly, the suit feeling like armor, but no matter how sharp it was, I knew it couldn't shield me from what was about to happen. I wasn't just fighting for my freedom, I was fighting for their future. I met Jessica at the courthouse. She was standing outside, her eyes tired but determined. She gave me a nod as I approached, but I could see the weight of this fight in her too. She wasn't just helping me, she was helping my kids. And that made everything harder. You okay? She asked, her voice quiet. I nodded. I will be. We entered the building and the atmosphere shifted. The high ceilings, the cold marble floors, and the sterile, impersonal feel of the courthouse made everything feel more official, more daunting. My heart was racing. I could hear my pulse in my ears as we approached the waiting room where Nicholas was already sitting, reviewing his notes. The moment I sat down, a tension built in my chest, making it harder to breathe. The hearing wasn't just about legal matters. It was about my life, my children, and my future. Everything I had known was on the line. When they finally called us in, the courtroom felt smaller than I had imagined. There was no fanfare, no dramatic build-up. Just a judge behind a raised desk, scribbling notes while we took our places. The room was filled with the faint rustle of papers, the sound of chairs scraping against the floor, and the quiet murmur of voices. Marina was already there, seated at the plaintiff's table with her attorney, Amber Becker. She didn't look at me. She didn't have to. The way she held herself, the way her eyes seemed to stare past me, was enough to remind me why we were here. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, looked up from her papers. Mr. Caldwell, Miss Caldwell, she said, her voice firm. We're here today to determine the custody arrangement for the children. I've read the motions. Let's proceed with the evidence. I could feel my nerves tighten, but I pushed them down. This was it. There was no turning back now. Jessica gave her testimony first, recounting the manipulation she had seen Marina use over the years. How Marina had used the kids to control me, how she had emotionally abused them without a second thought. She spoke with conviction, her voice steady as she described Marina's erratic behavior. Each word cut through the air like a blade, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. Next, Nicholas presented the evidence we had gathered: school record, showing how involved I had been with the kids, medical records, photos, and financial documents. We showed that I had been a constant presence in their lives. It wasn't just about money or material things. It was about being there for them when it mattered most. When it was Marina's turn to speak, I watched her carefully. She was calm, composed, but I could see the cracks beneath her surface. She spoke about the kids like they were trophies, things to be claimed. She barely acknowledged the years of deceit, the manipulation. When Amber asked her about the paternity of the children, she skirted around it, trying to dismiss it as irrelevant. But the truth was clear. Marina had been hiding the truth from everyone, including me, for years. The judge didn't seem impressed by her testimony. She glanced at her notes, then at Marina before turning back to the room. "I've heard enough," she said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too many of these cases. "We'll take a short recess. I'll render my decision shortly." The room emptied out and I walked outside with Jessica, Nicholas, and my lawyer. My mind was a whirlwind. What would the judge decide? How would this all end? Outside, the cool air hit me like a slap in the face. I stood there for a moment, just breathing, trying to gather myself. Jessica turned to me, her face serious. "James, you've done everything you can. It's in the judge's hands now." I nodded, but the doubt still lingered. The fear. What if it wasn't enough? What if Marina found a way to twist the truth, to pull the rug out from under me? Just as I was about to speak, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Dylan. "Dad, I miss you." The words hit me like a wave. I thought about all the times I had been there for them. All the little moments that made me their dad. This fight wasn't just about winning. It was about ensuring they knew that no matter what happened, I was their father, and I would always be there for them. I looked at Jessica, my voice thick with emotion. "I can't lose them. I can't let her take them away." "You won't," she said softly. "You're stronger than this. You're doing everything right." We all went back inside when the recess was over. The judge returned to the bench and the room quieted. "I have made my decision," she said, looking directly at me. My heart pounded in my chest. The judge's words echoed in my mind, and for a moment, the world seemed to slow down around me. My heart hammered in my chest, the silence in the courtroom suffocating. I held my breath, waiting for her to speak, but she didn't. The room felt colder suddenly. I glanced at Marina, her face stone cold, her lips pressed tight. She didn't seem nervous, but I could see the flicker of something behind her eyes. She was waiting, just like me. The judge shuffled through her notes, her gaze moving over the documents. I could feel the tension building, each second stretching into eternity. Finally, she looked up. Her eyes locked onto mine, and I knew this was it. "Mr. Caldwell," she began, her voice firm and decisive, "I've considered all the evidence presented. The testimony, the documents, and the behavior of both parties involved." I exhaled slowly, the breath I had been holding in my lungs for what felt like hours now rushing out. "After careful review," she continued, "I've decided to grant Mr. Caldwell temporary full custody of the 3 minor children." My heart leaped in my chest, but there was no relief yet. I had heard the word, temporary. I wasn't done fighting. The judge raised a hand, silencing the room. "Mrs. Caldwell, you will have supervised visitation every other weekend, starting immediately. This will continue for 6 months, at which time the situation will be reevaluated. You must comply with therapy and anger management courses as outlined in your agreement." I barely heard the rest. My mind was spinning. I'd won. For now. But there was still a long road ahead. The sound of papers being shuffled brought me back to the present. The judge's voice was still steady, but now she was addressing us all. "I will not make a final decision on the division of property or the alimony request until further hearings. Mrs. Caldwell will need to demonstrate significant progress in her therapy before we proceed with those motions." Marina stood up abruptly, her chair scraping loudly against the floor. She didn't say a word, but her eyes were locked on me, cold and full of fury. The judge motioned for her to remain seated, but Marina didn't seem to care. I stood up as well, my legs shaking with the weight of everything. My lawyer gave me a brief, encouraging nod, but I couldn't focus on him. I was still processing what the judge had just said. Temporary custody. I'd won temporarily, but I wasn't sure how I felt. I turned toward the door, needing to get out of that room, needing to breathe. "James." I froze, hearing Jessica's voice behind me. I turned to find her walking toward me, a smile on her face, but I could see the tension in her eyes. "You did it," she said quietly, her voice full of relief. You really did it. I shook my head, not feeling the joy that she expected. It's temporary. The kids are still caught in the middle. I haven't won anything yet. Jessica's expression softened, and she placed a hand on my shoulder. You've won something, James. You've got time with them. That's what matters. I nodded, but it didn't feel like enough. I walked out of the courtroom with a heavy heart, the battle only just beginning. Marina had been stopped, but I knew she wasn't going to give up easily. As we stepped into the hallway, I heard the soft sound of footsteps behind me. Dad. Dylan's voice stopped me in my tracks. I turned around, and there he was, standing at the entrance to the courtroom, his face a mix of confusion and hope. You okay? He asked, his voice quiet, unsure. I walked over to him, my legs still feeling unsteady. Yeah, buddy. Are we going home? He asked, his voice soft like he was afraid to ask. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. Yeah, we're going home. But we still have a long way to go, okay? Dylan nodded, and for the first time in a while, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Trust, or maybe even a little relief. We walked together, slowly, as the sound of our footsteps echoed in the hallway. Jessica joined us, walking alongside me, her hand resting lightly on my back. I felt a wave of gratitude wash over me. She had been there every step of the way, and now, it felt like maybe I could see the light at the end of the tunnel. When we reached the car, Dylan climbed into the back seat, his eyes still distant, but I could tell he was processing. I sat in the front, my mind still whirling. The legal battle was far from over, but the kids were with me for now. The drive home was quiet, each of us lost in our own thoughts. When we finally reached the house, I felt the weight of the day sink into my bones. But as I stepped out of the car and looked at the house, I realized something. I wasn't alone. I had my kids, I had Jessica. And no matter what happened next, that was something no one could take away. The house felt different now, less like a prison and more like a home again. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. We were going to be okay. The weeks that followed the hearing were a blur. The temporary custody was a small victory, but it felt like nothing more than a momentary pause in a war I was still fighting. The pressure was relentless, and the more I tried to focus on the kids, the more the reality of the situation gnawed at me. I spent every waking moment trying to keep things normal. Dylan went back to school, though I could tell it was harder for him. He barely spoke about the court proceedings, but I saw how tense he was, how withdrawn he had become. Kayla buried herself in her books, and Mariel still tried to keep things light, but I saw the way he clung to me. When he thought I wasn't looking. It wasn't just the kids who were struggling. I was too. Every time I looked at them, I wondered if I was enough, if I could truly protect them from the damage Marina had caused. I wasn't just fighting for custody anymore. I was fighting to make sure they didn't carry the scars of this battle for the rest of their lives. One evening, after dinner, I found myself sitting in the living room, watching the kids as they played a board game at the table. They were laughing, their voices filling the room with an energy I hadn't heard in weeks. I couldn't help but feel a pang in my chest. This was the life I wanted. This was what I was fighting for. Dad, Dylan said, breaking me from my thoughts. He was standing in the doorway, holding his phone, his face a mix of hesitation and something else. I looked up, surprised. What is it, buddy? He stepped forward, holding out the phone. It's Roy, he called. My stomach dropped. The mention of Roy's name stirred a familiar anger in me, but I couldn't avoid this. It was time to face it. I took the phone from Dylan, my hand shaking slightly. Hello, James. Roy's voice came through the line, rough and tired. What need to talk? I didn't say anything at first. There was nothing left to say, nothing I hadn't already heard. But I knew I had to listen. What do you want? I asked, my voice cold. I want to make things right, Roy said, his voice low. I know I messed up. I didn't mean for all this to happen, but I'm trying to fix it. I'm trying to do the right thing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. This was the man who had destroyed everything, who had abandoned his son, and now he wanted to act like some kind of hero. You can't fix this, Roy, I said, my voice rising. You don't get to walk back into our lives after everything you've done. I know, he said, a sigh escaping him. I get it, but I'm willing to help. I'll do whatever it takes to make things right for Dylan. I didn't trust him, I couldn't. But part of me that was still clinging to some sense of what had once been, wanted to believe him. Why now? I asked, still gripping the phone tightly. After all these years, why now? I've been a coward, James, he admitted. I left because I couldn't face what I had done. I didn't want to lose everything, and now I realize I already have. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. What are you asking for? Roy paused before answering. I just want to be a part of his life. I want to do this right, James. I'll sign whatever papers you need. I'm not asking for custody, just a chance to be there for him. I felt the anger building in me again, but this time it wasn't just for Roy. It was for the years he had stolen from Dylan, for the mess he had left in his wake. But more than that, it was for the man I had once called a friend who now seemed like a stranger. You don't get to just show up and fix things, Roy, I said, my voice tight. You don't get to claim anything after abandoning him. I know, he said, his voice thick with regret. But I'm asking for a chance. If you'll let me, I want to help him. Help him understand that I'm sorry. I closed my eyes for a moment, trying to gather my thoughts. This was more complicated than I wanted it to be, and I hated every minute of it. I'll think about it, I said finally. But don't expect me to make it easy for you. Dylan deserves better than what you've given him. I know, Roy said again, quieter now. I won't screw it up, I swear. I hung up the phone and stood there, staring out the window. The sky was darkening, the quiet of the evening settling over the house. Dylan, Kayla, and Mariel were still at the table, lost in their game. For a moment, I wondered if they would ever understand the complexity of what was happening. How could they? But I couldn't shield them from it forever. I knew that. I knew there would come a time when they'd have to face the truth, when they'd have to decide for themselves what role the men from their past would play in their future. I walked over to the table and sat down, forcing a smile as I joined them. How's the game going? Mariel looked up and grinned. We're winning, Dad. Good, I said, ruffling his hair. Keep it up. The truth of it all was still there, lurking beneath the surface. The battle wasn't over, not by a long shot. But for the first time in weeks, as I sat there with my kids, I felt a small glimmer of peace. We had a long way to go, but we were in it together. And that was enough for now.